Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Food Safety and Security Challenges During the Current Pandemic, organized by Africa Food Manufacturing in partnership with the National Food Safety Authority in Egypt, the MENA Food Safety Associates, and AHDO. My name is Maggie Faiz, Sales Manager at Informa Markets, and on behalf of Informa on Africa Food Manufacturing and FI team, I'm honored to be the moderator of today's webinar. First of all, our thoughts and prayers are with the families and friends of those who have been affected in Beirut explosion. Now, as you are aware, the current impact of COVID-19 has presented challenges that prevent us from coming together as an industry in person until restrictions are eased. Nevertheless, we are committed to providing our customers with the latest trends in the food industry through digital solutions. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by three of the top food safety experts in the MENA region who will share with us their extensive knowledge on the challenges faced by the F&B industries during the current pandemic and the safety measures to be taken to overcome these challenges. I'm very pleased to introduce to you our remarkable guest speakers, Dr. Hussein Mansour, the Chairman of the National Food Safety Authority in Egypt, Mr. Atif Idris, the Chairman of MENA Food Safety Associates at MEFASA, last but not least, Mr. Mamdouh Haisa, Director of Arab Health and Development Corporation, AHDO. I'd like to remind you that this webinar is designed to be interactive, so we encourage you to type your questions into the text box located to the right of the presentation window, or you can click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. Now, we will start with Dr. Hussein Mansour's presentation discussing COVID-19 is an opportunity to improve the food safety control. Dr. Hussein Mansour, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, very good. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
You hear me? You hear me?
Yes, dear. We heard you very well.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all of you. And I always like to look to the disasters and the crisis from the positive point, more than to see it as a real problem, because it has many learning lessons that we can learn from. Specifically for COVID-19, the problem related to food, especially as it's not really important, because food would not be a media for transferring the virus, according to WHO and the other relevant agencies, that food is not source of danger for the COVID. But especially in the country like Egypt and probably other developing country, the concept and culture of hygiene is not really well practiced. And we are learning with the hard way that we should concern more about hygiene, basic hygiene, personal hygiene, how to protect ourselves from transferring viruses and bacteria and other sources of microbial contamination for food and for others. And probably we can learn more about also that we reduce some of our habits to be crowded, to be kissing each other all the time, whether there is need or not. And this will leave for us, especially for the young generation, a kind of fear from transferring the microbiology, the contaminant for viruses and bacteria, and for protecting ourselves in general. Food Agriculture Organization, FAO, and WHO, both of them confirmed that COVID-19 is not primary source of transmitting the virus, not through food or also packaging. However, definitely some of the challenges will be more on the availability of food through shutting down the premises and shutting and reducing the activity is more related to lack of people if the people are getting sick. Egypt were very much concerned about that, especially that there is a lot of food is imported, and we decided to work 24 hours with all the challenges possible in the ports in order to secure the entrance of food to Egypt without any kind of compensation of the safety element of receiving the food, but in the same time we trying to make things easier. And we issued a couple of technical regulations for easing and making life a little bit easier for importing food without sacrificing the concept of food consumption. In the same time, we made an advantage of preparing guideline for how to deal with the event. And unfortunately, the guideline, it is written in Arabic, but if it's needed to any other country, we can make it in English right away. It's not a big problem over that. And it has introduction, it has some basic information on the COVID-19. We have another section on COVID-19 and food handler in general, and some information about sanitation and cleaning. And the last part was relating to air and how to ensure that the air is coming to the place without being contaminant. And the merits and the advantage of this technical regulation goes beyond COVID-19. It's more for enhancing the facility for complying with food hygiene, basic food hygiene for COVID-19 or for any other contaminant. We asked the food establishment, and we made conferences with them through Zoom, that they must measure the body temperature of all employees, including the visitors, updating the database concerning information for the employee, supervise the employee for prompt healthy practices, provide an adequate number of sanitary facilities, such as much like sinks and toilets and things like that must be routinely cleaned and sanitized in the proper way, providing hand sanitizers in all entrances, providing protective supplies as masks and the gloves. At the same time, all our employees will provide it with those important facilities, which is not big deal, which is the sanitizer and the mask and the gloves for all of them working. Because we reduced some of the people if they are vulnerable, like especially for pregnant women or for women raising small children. We prefer to keep them in home, and that caused stress on the other employee, that they work more time than it's supposed to be. Also, we distributed the awareness signs, like for hand washing, which is mainly from WHO, and washing hands frequently, and encourage reporting any case of symptoms, and not to try to punish the person, but try to compensate him with a salary as like he's working without any differences. Also for covering the nose and the hands. Keeping the social distance was also important in the guideline, and putting separate barriers for both sides of food processing lines to avoid facing between workers, providing personal protective equipment for workers, face masks and disposal gloves, reducing the transmission of infection between workers, staying home until complete recovery, and for him and for the people they were surrounding, communicating with Ministry of Health through hotline. There was two hotlines made in the Ministry of Health that they can get information, inform the supervisor right away for the case of illness or suspected medical condition at home. Even he is not the person himself, if is a related person in home got sick, he must inform, and right away we will take his word for that, and we will say stay home and don't come, and your salary will go. Flexibility of sick leave policy consistent with public health guideline. For the mask, we provide correct information about using them and the type of them and how to remove and dispose them. For the gloves also, there is some information relating to using them and the frequent use, and how to wash and disinfect the gloves. Important of changing gloves in case of departure or dirtiness, and changing glove frequently. Also during the break and lunchtime, there was some information about what the people supposed to use, like keeping social distance, cleaning and disinfecting the surface, switch breaks, and not to reduce the number of people in the break. And for the suppliers, also following precaution measures while dealing with the supplier to prevent infection of transmission to the facility, including drivers, information about dangers of transmission and the importance of social distance. For the supply chain recommendation, we continue to evaluate the correct food safety practices, setting up system to identify hazards and critical control points, achieve risk assessment to avoid contaminant, allergens, chemical, microbial, pollutant, etc., etc. Close the facility once there is discovery COVID-19, and closing the facility for 4 days, and sanitizing the facility, and allowing for the people not were on the shift of the incident to attend. Isolate the deceased worker, follow recommendation from Ministry of Health, return to work after negative results, and even it takes 14 days, recommendation for safe handling in retail establishment such as supermarkets also were taken. Disinfecting work environment, including surface contact with food, electrical equipment, and sanitizing them with Israel alcohol 70%. Transportation service, most common service as door handles, seats, window is all sanitized. In case of infection, stop operation and disinfections. Also the elevators, it is one of our concern, cleaning the wall, wiping the elevator keys in case of difficulty, covering them with plastic wrap with 70% alcohol, wiping the remainder of the floors after 3 minutes at least. The bathrooms also given special attendance, basins, faucets, and toilets using chlorine, concentration of 5 milligram per liter, moving after at least 3 minutes. Dining rooms, surface particularly, use dishes, equipment, trying to use disposal dishes and cups instead of permanent ones. scrubbing and raining with hot of water, disinfection with chlorine, drying in air, protecting the workers, wear suitable clean clothes, eye protection cap, and gloves and mask, disposal of waste in designated place in the garbage. Also, we give them some information about the different disinfectants that can be used for service, bathrooms, worker clothes, equipment, personal protective equipment, disposal management. We give them some recommendation of the proper detergent that can be used. And also the concentration and the contact time and the frequent time for using different disinfectant. For the ventilation also, we had some policy that the doors must be open and the window continuously for at least 3 times per shift for 20 minutes to change and get fresh air. In hour before work, 2 hours after work must be cleaned, must be opened in different parts of the facility strictly and accurately. If there is a center air condition, there are some precautions like turning the air condition in case of disease detection, turning them off, restarting it after cleaning and disinfection, turning on fresh air and not cold one, and weekly cleaning and disinfecting air condition equipment like filters and other things. The cleaning and disinfection for ventilation resources used some chlorine, bromine, and chlorine dioxide, and spraying also and soaking for 3-5 minutes, quadratic aluminum salt for metallic parts. And as I conclude, we used the crisis of COVID-19 to enhance and to change the food safety culture regarding sanitation and hygiene and applying personal hygiene in general. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hussein. Now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Atif Idris, who will be discussing food security in times of COVID-19. Dr. Atif, here you go.
Okay.
Mr. Atif.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you,
Yeah.
dear. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I hope you can hear me well. I'm speaking from Beirut, Lebanon, and I appreciate this opportunity to be along with your distinguished panel. I'd like to thank Informa and thank NFSA for hearing out some of the issues that we have in this country that has had a lot of dilemma with quality and with safety, particularly after this big explosion that happened in the Beirut port. The ability to understand the need to comply with food safety and security needs us all to understand that food safety and security are part of a bigger quality and safety scheme, including the safety of chemicals or the safety of institutions. In our company in MEFOSA, we try to address the Rome Declaration on World Food Security and the right of everyone to have adequate access to safe and nutritious food, and the fundamental right to be free from hunger. The issues of safety are, of course, very important, and understanding safety issues and how we should define food security. Food security is not a simple issue. It's an issue that addresses different paradigms related to food availability, the physical availability of food in your proximity, the economic access to food, your ability to buy and access food that is suitable for your health, the utilization of food, and the stability of the 3 dimensions above over time. Food security is not a simple issue, but sometimes it's an issue that needs addressing at different levels, levels that address supply chain and supply side of food security. A lot of the food that we procure in our economies is not delivered from our retail outlet. Sometimes it comes from faraway economies, from Africa, from Brazil, or from Asia, or from Australia. And our ability to understand the availability of long supply food chains is important. And in this day and age of food access, one needs to understand also that food is a determinant of development. Good food, nutritious food is part of the supply development programs that we are addressing in the Millennium Development Goals in this part of the world and all over the world. The components of food security are not only simple, they sometimes address dimensions of security that relate to availability, that relate to access, relate to stability of supplies, and all relate to utilization nutritionally and safely, and development of mental capacities of our infants. So food security is a four-dimensional issue that has been developed across with time. In our Arab world, we have problems in food security. The COVID situation might have exacerbated these or advanced these issues. The situation in Lebanon, for example, with the explosion in our port might disrupt further the supply chains. But look at this figure where we have unrest in different parts of the world in this region, in Iraq or in Sudan, in different parts of the region, we have food insecure communities that needs to better advance their sustenance and better advance their food safety. Countries like Syria that have gone through unsafe and exaggerated food security issues because of war or civil unrest. So how does food security and food safety emerge? It is, of course, an issue of global nature, but of course, it is an issue that addresses shortages sometimes of certain supplies because of environmental change, or it addresses food prices because of poverty, or food hoarding because of COVID-19. People, instead of buying one item, buy 5 items, and sometimes we need to address how we buy and what we buy and the quantities we buy. And of course, food contamination is at core, particularly when there are issues of unrest, like in a situation in Lebanon. The explosion contaminated our corn and our feed and of our silos. The silos of Beirut were destroyed, and because of the explosion, the food was contaminated with all kinds of ammonium nitrate discharges from the explosion. So here the symptoms in a food safety and a food security issues in a period of unrest or pandemics is symptomatic to deterioration of health or poor nutritional availability, even losses of life because of contaminated food or unrest in turbulent times and economic instability. Political instabilities have erupted in a lot of nations that were unsecure with their foods, and a lot of these issues are additioned with poverty and climate change. So in a pandemic situation, there are a need for a lot of work from public-private partnerships, including civil society, engaging chronic hunger, addressing food insecurity needs also multinational players that can develop and deliver on their food supplies. Lebanon is depending on its food supplies from Egypt these days, but a lot of the support is coming also from inter-Arab countries and from regional supplies. We are proud that our Arab community is supporting and providing for the community. Food security in a region that have more than 135 million people in extreme hunger needs new programs that are internetted among the region. And in a case of pandemic, the higher the food security issue, the more stable the issues are coming out. So the support regionally from different countries, in the case of Lebanon, has helped in sustaining the pandemic and in addressing opportunities with our partners in the Greater Arab Free Trade Area. The region has an area that is supporting countries in different parts with different issues of food security, and sometimes countries are reaching out to address the impediments of food safety, the impediments of the insecure situation. We need to understand that the securities did not start with COVID-19. They have started with a mad cow disease. They have also came across with an avian flu and the swine flu. We remember that SARS put forward a lot of pandemics in our community, but even addressing other issues boldened our determination to work on standardized food safety measures and to empower our regulatory agencies. And we're proud that Dr. Hussein Mansour with us now with the Food Safety Authority and a regional program that is addressing a lot of issues that remained still unharmonized regionally. The more we're able to do through Informa platforms addressing the internal impediments, the better we are all equipped regionally to address COVID-19. But how can such pandemics strengthen our global approach? Of course, our approach is not only in addressing UNIDO requirements and harmonizing international rules of SPS, TBT, sanitary and phytosanitary or technical barriers, but also in addressing as well the international rules that can help us collectively work together. Again, addressing harmonization of best practices at different levels, at the macro, at the micro, but even at the household level. We are learning from Egypt. We are offering our programs, but at the same time, understanding that there is a region called the Greater Arab Free Trade Area that we need to address collectively will help us put more integrated programs together. Our case studies here are related to what we are doing not only in the Arab region but in Africa, and with the ESWA we have developed programs that are relevant to food safety across the region and in developing nations. And of course, we look at the best practices that are presented by the CDC and by European support schemes, where we look at transportation supply chains, where we look at national government engagements at different levels, but we look at individual company by company engagements, which are very important. In a case study that we have done in Madagascar, we are trying to address corona issues in a supply chain that comes from Africa all the way to Europe. And here we look at how Informa through the Africa Food Manufacturing 19 and 20 allowed a lot of our companies to share best experiences and to address the practices for us to help, for example, export vanilla from Madagascar all the way to Europe with the best quality terms using water activity management that can help us control the quality, and how USAID projects can also address new product development at par with quality schemes and safety schemes to address our markets. And MEFOSA prides itself that it works with a lot of stakeholders to address research. Research is the main driver for food safety and food security, but at the same time, we drive COVID-19 not only through the practices that Dr. Hussein presented of social distancing, of infection control, of sanitation, of hygiene, but also through research. And it is through research that MEFOSA works with different partners in the region to address codex requirements, to address UNDF and UN development requirements, but at the same time working with different development agencies, European, American, Japanese, is at core of what we do in controlling a lot of the food safety and pandemic related issues. Thank you for your time. I hope this was a cover-up of what we do here in MEFOSA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Atif. Now I'd like to introduce Mr. Mamdouh Haisa, who will discuss COVID-19 and food safety. Mr. Mamdouh, over to you.
Let me please welcome, thank you, Informa, for this organization, as well as MEFOSA, and actually being lucky that Dr. Hussein is with us. So we might, if we offer something, it might be taken into action. Although actually actions are taken through these few days ago. So we will go through actually the food safety and the relationship between 19. Also, it looks there is no relationship. Sorry. The relationship between the 19 and food safety. Actually, let's start by the headline entitled for this day, which is actually food safety and food security. Most of us would think that this I would say pandemic has affected only the food safety. No, actually, the first line was actually the food security, and we knew from the words delivered Dr. Atif actually its effect on the food security as well. So anyway, let's concentrate that much deep about COVID-19. However, as is an infection, respiratory disease, okay, which I'm sorry, which affects okay, respiratory diseases. It's called. I mean, it's classified as a respiratory diseases. Recently, coronavirus called it SARS-CoV-2 virus, and this is, as we can see nowadays, is a pandemic affecting the whole globe. Actually, the respiratory droplets, whether if it's direct through an affected person to another if the physical distance is less than 1 meter, as stated by the WHO. The second thing maybe, I mean, could be and then touching the T-zone as shown, eyes, nose, and symptoms actually, fever starting by 37.5 and then dry. However, it's not only dry, and finally, actually, not the least, shortness, and that's actually what was considered within the whole I would say MEFOSA in Egypt, for example, guidelines.
Mr. Mamdouh, I think there is a problem in the connection.
It's stated like that. It's highly unlikely that people can contact COVID-19 from food or from food packaging. As yes, please. Yes. Hello.
All right, you can go on. It's okay.
Okay, now.
Yes, now
okay.
it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So there is no evidence now to date that such respiratory diseases or illnesses being transmitted via food or food packaging. Coronaviruses can't multiply in food, and this is actually clearly known. Then, of course, they need an animal or human host to multiply. Based on that quick background, let's go through actually a few guidelines for the food business at the beginning. For the food business, it starts by very important actually statement. It's the management commitment. At the first, actually, if we have, I would say established a solid food starting by the top management commitment, so the whole thing will be under control. The point here actually not just to say a food safety management system. As stated by the WHO and the Food and Agriculture Organization, HACCP principles-based effective food safety management should be in place. So actually, the point here is not to use that much jargons for a business which is its size is small or considered small, medium and high. Of course, they would be different. This should be taken into consideration, and we'll come to this point later. Food safety management systems taken into consideration should be actually underpinned by the prerequisite programs. And actually, these guidelines are clearly shown within the Codex Alimentarius guidelines concerning food hygiene. What actually concerning this point, the last point we need to concentrate about it is that not to run to the most sophisticated food safety management systems. No, we should go actually for the most simplest one, fitting our type of business and of course the size. Anyway, the food business risk management, and here the question would come how to protect our team during COVID-19. And these measures actually taken into consideration through the few words given by Dr. Hussein Mansour, stress some points. Personal hygiene measures, and this is actually really very important considering this point and other points. Properly PPE, the personal protective equipment, it might be masks where appropriate, gloves, aprons, etc. Training on food hygiene principles, and this would be the most important part actually, is training, not only enforcing the measures and such PPEs. Of course, again, another very important part, which is physical distancing. As we have mentioned earlier, and actually based on the WHO guidelines, the infected or infected person to another if the physical distance is maintained at 1 meter or 3 feet, as said by the WHO. So again, and actually the final most important one, not the least, proper cleaning and disinfection. Concerning this point, actually, we need to be more realized and thinking about costs, because I mean, if you thought about cost, such implementation would be really in place and effective.
Uh, Mr. Mamdouh, we lost you for the last few seconds.
Symptoms, this would be very important. And finally, back to work policies. Back to work policies should be taken into consideration and really followed in place, because one person, as we know, since the beginning of this pandemic, it took less than 3 months to affect more than 7 million affected people around the globe, and now actually they have increased. Food business risk management, again, how to manage the outdoor food markets and takeaways, and this is actually mainly would be given to this advice to we would say the retailers and the food service establishments. We would actually, it would be great to encourage them ordering online, ordering by telephone, providing delivery rather than you go and take away. And in case of you will pick up the takeaway item yourself, so queue management should be there. Actually, nowadays, with the conditions in Egypt, for example, the NEFSA, the National Food Safety Authority in Egypt, and other authorities, they have clearly set some rules concerning this point, and they have allowed some food establishments, service establishments to open, but with many conditions, like to maintain the physical distancing, etc. So if we could do so, it would be the same, we would, I mean, reach the same result we look for, which is queue management system. Food business risks management, by actually implementing these measures, as we can see, we would protect our business through protecting the staff from spreading the COVID-19 among workers, detecting and excluding infected food handlers from the work, maintain a healthy work force, and finally, actually, this would sustain the business and, of course, develop it. And, of course, would be reflected in the whole economy in the country. This third point, actually, which is very important, and quickly we should go through it, the guidance for food workers. Food workers actually are defined as the food handlers, managers, cleaners, maintenance contractors, and delivery workers and food inspectors. Okay, this should be taken into consideration. Most of the time, we would not think that food workers are, for example, and even the delivery workers or maintenance contractors. Food workers are unlikely, as we said earlier, to contaminate food if they follow good personal hygiene practices and physical distancing. Those actually the two keywords we should keep all the time. Good personal risk of transmission of most foodborne illnesses, and good personal hygiene practices would include frequent hand washing, use of hand sanitizing, uses of protective clothing, and finally, for example, good respiratory hygiene. Concerning this point, actually, the WHO celebrates every year a day called Hand Washing Day. And actually, here in Ahdo, we do celebrate this day in more rates in Egypt. Yes, last year actually we have celebrated in 7 governorates, and we allow many people, even not inside AHDO, outside of AHDO, and to encourage the all non-governmental organizations to do so. And even we did it earlier out of Egypt within one of in Kenya. Work practices management for the staff practice during COVID-19 would be again the 5 steps of hand washing, please. And here we should encourage them not just to wash hands. Actually, I had some, I would say, some TV interviews, and one day I have to take off my watch, and it started to explain how to wash hands practically on the TV. After I have finished, many people told me actually, I don't know that hand this way. So please, we need to stress not only hand washing, but at least grabbing hands for at least 20 seconds during this part. Good respiratory hygiene, and to use the elbow in case of coughing and sneezing, because it's not planned action actually. Frequently cleaning these measures are mentioned by Dr. Hussein within his own presentation, so I'll not go through it. Keep doors open, of course, as much as we can during the business and here. If you can keep the door and it will not affect the safety of the property, so keep the doors in order not to use the handle of it. Wrapped bakeries products, and finally gloves policy. Actually, gloves policy is very important, and it's not, I mean, unfortunately, and even WHO states this point,
Mr. Mamdouh, I'm sorry we lost you again. Thank you, Mr. Mamdouh. Now we can move to the questions and answers part. So this question is for Mr. Hussein Mansour. How can we guarantee food safety for kids at schools?
Three types of food that can be utilized by kids at school. Dr. Mamdouh wants to talk, or can I continue?
Hand washing, good respiratory hygiene, and the same measures. I'm hearing. Yes, tell me.
Yes, dear. Actually, we lost you for the last few seconds. So now we move to the questions and answers part.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, may I have a few minutes only?
Yeah, definitely. Sure.
Just to say the conclusion?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, the effective implementation solutions concerning this point, the food safety and the flexibility has approaches and key to success. Actually, we need to think about it when it comes to legislation all around the globe. The food safety managed system should be based on the HACCP principles. This is important, not to be sophisticated, not to choose sophisticated standards. We should take into consideration the size of the business and the type, and of course, the legislation. Food safety management system as well, we should consider the climate and of course the resources. Point actually, the type of business are manufacturing, food service establishments, and retailers. So when we choose the management system, the food safety management system, we should consider these types. So, for example, the United States Food and Drugs Administration, they have two approaches to implement HACCP. The one which is known widely and broadly, which is, we might call it HACCP Codex, is a product approach mainly for manufacturing, food manufacturing sector. However, when it comes to food service establishments like hotels, catering, retails, as well as retails, hospitals, etc., they should implement the process approach called HACCP FDA. Here we should consider a few things. Any system should be preventive, scientific, logical, and of course logical, and finally actually cost effective. Actually, many of the failure we would face concerning this point when it comes to implementation is actually choosing inappropriate systems. You would find very small business, I mean the whole workers of this business are 2 or 3, and then they are certified the latest certificates around the globe. Actually, this shows that the implementation are not in place and are not reflecting the reality. All what we need to think about it, establishment, implementation, when we take this point, and monitoring procedures, which sometimes actually mix, and the verification part, which is internally by the company itself or the food business itself, and of course externally, one part of them would be the inspection bodies. I have finished concerning this point. It's your expectation.
Okay.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, now we are back to the questions and answers part. And this question from Dr. Hussein: how can we guarantee food safety for kids at schools?
Yes, as I trying to say that three sources of food for kids in schools. One of them, if they are getting a kind of lunch program from the government, which is the case in Egypt here, we as NEFSA, as a food safety authority, we put those processors and manufacturers on the highest category as risk factories. And we try to supervise them very strictly in considering the supplier. We call it supplier zero, who is the one who supplies the ingredients and the content of the food that is processed by the factory. But this is considered a small part of what kids eat. And the second part, which is supposed to come from the home, and actually, if we compare the type of currently ready-to-eat food that some mothers now take it as an easy way and to make their kids take it, not to make handmade food in home. I think this is deteriorating culture, and I did not expect this question from you, but I am up to now, and since I was in school, I take my lunch bag with me up to this minute. افتح يا ممدوح هنا هات لي اللانش باج بتاعتي. And from the time my mother was there, she gave me the sandwich I take home. Up to this minute, every day I take my this is my lunch bag.
Yes.
I take it with me from home, and it is has right now. It was not like this many years before, but right now it is consists of vegetables and fruits. And but at the old days it was sandwich, which is I take it from my home. And this needs a lot of work with changing the culture through the media and the NGOs actually, and this is related to what is has been said from Dr. Atif when he was talking about the wholesome of food, from the security and safety and availability and accessibility and nutrition, because there is 3 dimensions of food. It's, the food must be safe and wholesome and nutrient in the same time. And unfortunately, the part related to nutrition is a missing concept. You see how the food is balanced and it should be given to the kids. It is not there, and this is The main factoring in this is the mother, and we should work on the mother while she is a student in secondary schools. We should
Yeah.
start with that from that time. We should start our mission there. The last source, I don't want to take your time, is the street vendor, which is the kids are buying food from street vendor. And again, there is a part of the government responsibility to control street vendor. We definitely in Egypt here, our NIFSA has been 3 years old, and we are moving the responsibility gradually. And the first responsibility we took was the processors and manufacturers for a school lunch program. And we moved from there to cover all the factories, and then we moved to the export and import, and we are moving to the tourist next step. The street vendor will come little bit at later stage, but it's again it need propaganda and it need awareness from the public, and not to eat from street vendors, because most of the time we are not sure that personal hygiene in particular and hygiene environment has been applied for preparing the type of food, whether a drink or a type of food. But thanks for whoever asked the question, and I think it is very relevant question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I myself felt like I'm a proud mother, because this is what I'm doing to my 3-year-old baby. Thank you so much for making me feel that. Now this question is for Mr. Atif. What role could Lebanon and MEFASA play in the food security to sub-Saharan African countries?
Thank you, Maggie. MEFOSA works not only in the Arab region, but we also address the Lebanese diaspora that are working in West Africa, in East Africa, and in Sub-Saharan Africa. Our programs, with the help of our SPC team and Mrs. Manal Makki, is addressing food security, food safety in retailers in West Africa, in retailers and distributors in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, today we lost one of our front operators in Ethiopia. Mr. Naji Ghazawi passed away yesterday. He was working on food safety and the export of coffee from Ethiopia to Saudi Arabia, from Ethiopia to a lot of international communities all the way to Japan. So what we do in MEFOSA is we help producers in Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa to address food safety measures and to understand how COVID-19 affects long supply chains. Food is not contaminated itself, but the packages of food, as Mr. Mamdouh pointed out, and the supply chains from different parts of Africa all the way to Europe are, of course, very important in addressing a sustainable supply chain from Sub-Saharan Africa all the way to consumers all over the world, in Japan, in France, in Australia, and in elsewhere North American markets. We support the food industry, understand how the viruses, how the bacteria, how the pathogens are transmitted with food, but we supply the technology that can help the Madagascar exporter control water activity, that can help an exporter of coffee in Ethiopia address quality measures all the way to Japan and to Codex requirements. I hope I answered your question, Maggie.
Yes, dear. Thank you so much. This question for Mr. Mamdouh Haissa. What's the most food safety regulations that Arab countries can adopt immediately to combat the issue of food security?
Okay, actually, this part would be first of all actually the legislation. when it comes to the whole country. So the legislation is the first step, which is considered as the first step of any, I would say, the legislation part is the establishment. This is where we will go, and this is the standard we should follow. So it's required actually not to run for any system, but to categorize at the first the whole business. Because, you know, if we maintain the food safety, this is of course will affect the food security. And that's why actually the name, I mean, for today was really a nice one, because the food security by the end will failure of the food safety as one part. So this starts by categorize the food business to manufacture. Large manufacturer, of course, will not be, I mean, should not choose the same food safety management system as a smaller one, etc. And this is part. The point actually, we most of us are failing. I mean, I would say make many failures concerning this point, unfortunately, when it comes to real implementation, because they are coming with a background of manufacturing and implementing that in the hospitality industry, for example, in a hotel, in the street vendors, as Dr. Hussein has mentioned, and thank you for that, and etc. So all those people, they require different, simple sometimes standards, and if we have chosen for them, actually selecting for them standards, which is very using, I mean, I would say actually even they are using this word, avoiding the jargons of management systems for them. To the point, you Maggie, you don't like to hear me talking to you and telling you the corrective actions, the verification, the validation. You will not like to hear these words. However, you like to hear the words, I mean, can be transmitted or transferred to action for you. So this is, of course, goes to the small food workers and food businesses. In addition to that, of course, selecting that and categorizing the business into 3 types: manufacturing, food service establishments, and finally retails, and then selecting for them appropriate food safety management system based on only the 7 HACCP principles, taken into consideration even sometimes small I would say vendor or I mean car street vendor, small day in somewhere, okay, you need to implement the PRC standards or the IFS or the FSSC, etc., or even HACCP. No, select them that, and this is actually not new thing. Actually, it's in the whole world, and if we have revised international legislation concerning this point, we will find only, not even the whole 12 standards. Starting from this point, I'm quite sure that we can move on. And of course, the collaboration between the whole Arab world, and actually this is would be great, Mr. Atif with us here, and Dr. Hussein. I would say the whole Arab world and maybe even the developed countries working together concerning this point, making their own committees, selecting their own even studies based on our resources, based on our economies, etc. I'm quite sure that we will move on. And actually, we are on the right track. I believe so.
Yeah.
Thank you, and
Thank
I
you
hope
so
I have
much.
answered your question.
Yes, dear. Thank you so much. Now, this question to Mr. Atif Idris. If the infection of COVID-19 can be established by food, by respiratory systems, what if an infected person handles the food?
As presented by Dr. Hussein, social distancing is at core. Keeping your mask on is very important. Countries are opening up because measures are being implemented by the individual before the company, by the company before the agency or the food safety authority. We need to understand that opening up our economies in the Arab world, in Lebanon as in Egypt, needs to understand food safety, needs to understand quality, but needs to implement this at your own company, at your own self. Like you mentioned, Maggie, I'm glad that you're feeling how you can manage it in your own household. And like Dr. Hussein said, it is how I manage my own food. You can buy your food from a vendor, but you need to understand that this vendor is certified vendor for quality. You can buy your food from a school program, but you need to understand that this school program is implementing ISO 22000 and is enforcing it for the benefit of its own employees. So what is at core here is how we understand COVID, how we relate it to food safety, and as Dr. Hussein said, how we relate it to our community, to our children, to our elderly mothers and fathers, but also to people who have the deficiencies in their immune systems. Those that are vulnerable are people that needs our special attention, even at the sanitary level of not only washing the hands or the environment, but of the cleaning of the environment. We at MEFOSA supply technologies that can help you quantify through measuring ATP and ADP the quality sanitation system. We supply hospitals with sanitizers that work at the nano application. Nano application is a droplet of 1 per 1,000 of a millimeter or 1 per million of a millimeter, so that the sanitation environment in a hospital out of work can help them to resume operation with a clean environment. And we hope to do it also across the region with the support of Dr. Hussein, because he is supporting SAFE, an initiative that works on a regional economy across 500 million people all over the greater Arab Free Trade area.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much. And I think I'm gonna send this video to all my family members. Thank you so much for what you are saying.
Very, very short comment.
Yes.
Thank you. Is the word hygiene is not in the Arabic language. And when we translate it to nazafa sahiyya. We do not have words like hygiene.
Yes.
I use hygiene as a word hygiene. Jim Yehnun. And we try to propagate for using the word hygiene because it reflects nazafa, ta'qim, tathir, which means cleaning, sanitation, and sterilization. And this word, we want to declare war against contamination and take COVID-19 as a good push for us to stick to hygiene, basic hygiene, to apply basic hygiene in our everyday activity to prevent us from COVID-19 and all other thousands of sources of contamination. Thank you very much. I learned from my speakers, which is honored your intervention. Dr. Atif is always philosophical in food in general, not only food safety, but he is beyond that. Thank you, and we learned it from Dr. Mamdouh. Thank you very much, and for you, because you were great coordinator for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hussein. Mr. Mamdouh is having something to say, right? Yes.
Actually, I liked the question of Dr. Hussein. Thank you very much for this word. You said hygiene, and really, yeah, when it comes to translation, many actually terms, international terms, actually we are here in AHDU, as we are providing the training for local authorities with coordination with the Arab Planning Institute. We have trained many, I would say, legislation bodies and inspection bodies around the Arab countries. So we are actually, because of the API, the Arab Planning Institute, we are concerned with Arabic language and the translation, especially these terms. And for your info, we might launch actually a project about the first dictionary about food safety and actually food terms. Thank you for this question. we would translate this word, and actually I'm concerned about translation. This is part of my even backgrounds, translation in general, and of course the legislation part, which was my study in Firenze College in Rome, in Italy. However, I would recommend to translate hygiene by الممارسات الصحية. الممارسات الصحية, this is where reflect. I understand because of the practices. I got your point, Dr. Hussein, because it might be confused with the word good hygiene practices.
Use hygiene as a word in rich Arabic language. We are not adding any new words in the Arabic language for years and centuries. Like we use the computer, we use the word pizza. There is no Arabic pizza. When we say pizza, we say pizza. We say even autobus. In Egypt, it's a French word. We don't say markabatun amma. You see, we don't say these words. Let us use the same English words to be Arabized. Like make it urbanize it and make it use hygiene. And we write hygiene. Like we write hard disk. Is anyone say اسطوانة صلبة مش عارف تحوي 15 ميجا? Nobody says that. It's hard disk. Use hard disk as a word, as an Arabic word. Enrich our Arabic language by introducing new term in the Arabic.
I agree with you. This actually would solve the issue in many other terms, you know, and we can discuss it later. Thank you for this way of thinking. Actually, you're thinking out of the box, and really, yes, it need to be concerned this point. And actually, this one point concerning the standards, etc. Food safety standards, actually, and I would actually thank the NEFSA concerning the standard enforced in Egypt. For example, Dr. Atif, now all the food establishments are enforced to implement the NEFSA guidelines. And actually, this way, I like it. Main part, and this would be again an extension to the the answer for the question you have asked me, Maggie. How can we enforce the systems in place? It's all about credibility. It's all about being credible. Now, you know, the NEFSA people, the inspectors, they are all are fine, and actually hope we do, and we actually are cooperating with them from time to another. They are enforcing the point, our own guidelines. And when the people telling them, I have this certificate, they're telling, I don't, trust this certificate, we trust our own. And this is very important because unfortunately the Arab world starts to be the world of certificates. You might get into many establishments, and Dr. Hussein would correct me, and Mr. Atif as well. Some places, they're having many certificates, unfortunately, but not credible. You know, when it comes to real implementation, they are not there. On all responsibility to start by really enforcing the system by choosing reliable, reasonable systems and cost-effective. Thank you concerning this point. Actually, I don't like to take more time containing this point, but thank you. And the communication, of course, between all of us. This would be great. And actually, that's what Informa did now, and your lovely smile, Maggie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Mamdouh. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Dr. Hussein Mansour, Mr. Atif Idris, and Mr. Mamdouh Haisa, as well as all the attendees for joining us today. Today's recorded session will be available soon in our website, Africa Food Manufacturing. So please feel free to share the recorded session with your colleagues and peers who were unable to join us today. In order to better serve you in our future webinars, we would like to have your feedback. So within the next hour, you will receive a personalized follow-up email with a link survey to fill. Finally, on behalf of our guest speakers and myself, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and we are looking forward to seeing you again in our upcoming webinars. Have a great day and stay safe.
Same to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be with you. I'm pleased to learn from you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.